Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today on how to build a sales and marketing power couple from Sales Hacker. We are sponsored here today by SAVO, which we're very excited to have with us, as well as a couple other people. My name is Richard Harris. I'm the Director of Sales Training and Consulting over at Sales Hacker. I'm probably the least important person in this conversation, but let's go ahead and get started with the other folks. Before we do all of the introductions, we do want to remind folks that this is designed to be a very interactive webinar. We do encourage people to ask questions throughout the webinar. We, of course, will have questions and answers at the end, but we think that sometimes the best questions are asked in the moment, and we like to keep our panelists on their toes as well, so it makes it a little bit more fun, so it's not too rehearsed. But anyway, without further ado, I want to introduce Lee Salz, who is from a sales management strategist at Sales Architect. I've known Lee for several years now. Very, very smart, both in sales and marketing, working with both of those teams with his organization. He is a best-selling author as well. He's had a couple of great award-winning books, one called Higher Right, Higher Profits. And then Lee also helps companies bridge the differentiation specifically between marketing and sales, which is why he is joining us. So welcome, Lee. We're glad to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. We also have Pia Heilmann, who is the Director of Sales at Attend. I've known Pia for several years now. I was actually fortunate enough to hire her in one of her very first SDR roles, and it's been fun staying in touch with her and watching her career grow, and it's fun to have you and good to talk to you and see you again, Pia.
Absolutely, likewise.
Sure. And then finally we have Jeremy Schultz, who is the VP of Sales Enablement and Operations over at SAVO. So we are very excited that not only is our sponsor here, but is also joining us for the webinar. And I believe you're dialing in just slightly north of the American border in Canada. So we hope that all internet and all technology works today. So,
absolutely. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. So without further ado, I really want to get into this, right? Like, let's jump right in. Sales and marketing, right? It's cats and dogs, right? It's chocolate and peanut butter. Sometimes they can get along really well and taste delicious, but other times it's terrible, right? It's not a good alignment. So why are we here today? Like in 2016, what's happening that we're seeing that with all the best intentions we've all been putting forth in all of our organizations, whether it's one of our panelists or one of our listeners, there's still this level of misalignment, what's going on. So, what are you guys seeing?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know if 2016 is necessarily the magic answer here, but an issue that's never been remedied is the gap between sales and marketing. And one of the common issues is that you don't have an executive referee, someone at the top working with the department heads on both sales and marketing to make sure that they're fully aligned. So there isn't malice between the two. They're both trying to do the right thing. But what you wind up with, without having that executive sponsor, the executive referee, if you will, sometimes you find that the ships are being rowed in opposite directions.
What do you attribute that to? Like, is Pia, what have you seen? And you may need to sort of tell people what without going into a pitch, what it is that Attend does from the smarketing role that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm selling into marketers. So I hear all the time, sales reps are not accountable. We struggle to get our reps to do X, Y, and Z. So there's a lot of back and forth, I think, between both functions in terms of sales kind of pointing the finger at marketing, saying, this is what I need, this is what I want, and you're not delivering. And then on the marketing side, it's, we're providing you with X, Y, and Z that you asked for, yet you're not taking the necessary steps to actually maximize what we're putting in front of you. So it's interesting to be a salesperson in the function where you're selling to marketing, because I have to check my ego at the door sometimes and say, look, I'm a salesperson, totally recognize that there are people in my function who are not doing X, Y, and Z, but obviously important to get that alignment to propel the business forward, because ultimately, as Lee said, both functions are trying to impact the bottom line. And you're seeing misalignment when there's not necessarily somebody at the top who's driving that alignment. So you need an executive referee, but I also think that you need executive sponsorship of that alignment. So somebody at top who can really, carry down the functions all the way down, obviously, to make sure that, people are playing nicely at all levels, from the top all the way to, the SDRs at the very bottom.
So, I'd love to dig in on this executive referee since you both sort of brought it up. Is that always the CEO? What if the CEO is sales-minded from their background or marketing-minded, and particularly today, I see a lot of CEOs who are engineering-minded, right? Like they've built the product, they've gone out and raised the funding. Maybe the better question is, what's the sign of a good referee at the executive level? What are some of the things those people are doing to really help facilitate this dialogue between the organizations, the two separate pieces?
So what I'm seeing is not saying as much as asking questions. In other words, they're asking both sides of the house, have we solicited the salespeople to hear what they're seeing in the field? Have we talked with clients and get direct feedback? What is marketing doing relative to the competitive landscape and seeing what other organizations are doing? So making sure that the company has all of the most important information to make the best decisions.
Lee, I think you bring up a good point too. It's not just sales and marketing, right? There is the function of customer success, which I think is finding its way into a lot of these conversations and ultimately lives under that whole concept of revenue. So in addition to those functions, you obviously want to make sure that there's alignment through the entire customer journey, not just from lead to customer, but then during that customer journey as well, informs both sides in terms of what the likes were, what the dislikes were, and how they interacted with both sales and marketing as well.
How much of this do you think is sort of an ego situation, between the department heads, and how much of it could boil really down to compensation, right? Marketing's being, it certainly feels like marketing's being held a little bit more accountable to some specific numbers, maybe more so than they did 5 years ago. And so for them, that might be a little bit more nerve-wracking, whereas sales is like, welcome to the club. We've been doing this all our lives. So is there something around the egos of these people, the compensation plans that people aren't aligned on compensation that also contributes to this? And so that's one question. And of course, the follow-up question will be well, what have you seen that sort of, strips that stuff away and makes it put everybody on the same page? So, Jeremy, I don't know if you maybe wanted to add something on this one.
Yeah, from our perspective, and what I see all the time is, I'll go back to not necessarily the compensation and ego question, but I'll agree that it's about alignment. And it's one thing to have a CMO or VPs of marketing aligned with an SVP of sales, or in my case, the head of sales ops and enablement. But that's like having my nutritionist and my personal trainer aligned. At the end of the day, I'm the one that has to execute all of the activities in order to be successful. So alignment needs to happen beyond the executive. So an executive coach is important to establish a governance council, to set a wireframe for governance and a process to ensure that the leadership is aligned. But then from there, most importantly, what you need is a feedback mechanism so that the governance team, sales and marketing both, understand what is being consumed, what's being used, and that's one half of it. And the other half of what, once it's being used, what's hitting the mark with customers, what's hitting the mark with sales reps. And only when that feedback loop is in place do you know what you're creating as an aligned leadership team. Is that even hitting the mark with the sales team? Are they using it? And then if they are using it, is that hitting the mark with your customer and prospect base? Is it resonating? So you can have alignment. You can get alignment via an executive coach and a governance team, and that's hard. And it's paramount. It's extremely important. But even then, you need that feedback mechanism. And nowadays, there's amazing capabilities out there in the marketplace to ensure that the governance team, if in fact they're there and aligned, they have the information they need to drive this. So that's my overall opinion so far. Now, as far as compensation, In my perspective, yeah, the game's changing. Marketing technology, account-based marketing is bringing the marketer forward into the sales process a lot more than maybe in the past, where sales was armed with a bunch of information and kicked in the pants and told to go make a quota. And from a sales perspective, I'm not sure that there's quite sensitivity to compensation, but maybe from the marketer's perspective, I think maybe Pia and others have a better opinion there. But from an ego standpoint, absolutely. Sales, especially successful salespeople, like to believe that if they're successful, whatever they're doing is working and they don't need to change. And again, that governance and that feedback loop is even more important, so that A, you can help them understand what's working for others and make them either more successful, or B, understand what's making them successful and replicate that across the rest of the sales team.
You know, it's funny, I have a slightly different take on it, I think, and you and I have spoken about this a little bit before, but I have an ego. The first to admit, I think any good salesperson has an ego. And I think that historically, I've been the kind of person that attributed a lot of my early success to prospecting my own leads, putting things in Salesforce that may have not been there beforehand. And I have a personal connection to those. So as you watch them progress through some sort of cycle, you, as the person who added them, have that ownership and that sense of wrapping your arms around something. So maybe not ego as much as ownership necessarily, because then from a sales side, when I see that from a multi-touch attribution perspective, you've got many downloads of content, interactions with webinars, attendance at events, etc. Obviously, those are all propelling somebody forward, but because I added that and that's a personal interest of mine, you know, you want to kind of claim that as your own, even though ultimately you're comped on the close as opposed to how many people, are MQLing. But there is an ego element to it. And then on the flip side, from a marketing perspective, I think the same concept. They are very proud of the work that they've done to progress somebody through some sort of funnel, and often compensated based on that. So I think there is a little bit of friction between the two functions just by nature of the fact that they're proud of their own work. And I think the best thing, obviously the point of this webinar, is when you can align the two so that there is an understanding that ultimately you're working together to impact the bottom line. And if you can take a step back and check your ego and realize that when it comes down to it, it is multi-touch. Regardless, there are going to be, particularly in the world that we're in now, many different touches into an account by sales and marketing. Very rarely is it going to be solely one. Then you're starting a different conversation.
And if I could add something, come back to Jeremy reminded me of something when you mentioned the dietitian. Before our program today, I was at the gym with my teenage sons, and we had a great workout. And I said, okay, so now we got to talk about what we're going to eat, because exercise is a stimulus, and if you just exercise and don't look at diet, you won't get peak performance. If you diet and don't exercise, you're not going to get peak performance. And the same goes true with sales and marketing. They have to work hand in hand to achieve the common goal, which is sell more deals at the prices that the company wants. So marketing can't succeed without sales. Sales can't succeed without marketing. They have to be in tandem. And so there is a compensation conversation to take place there to make sure they both are being rewarded for achieving the same objectives.
Great. And there's actually a question coming from the audience from Jill Rowley. And Jill, thanks for this question. There's your free plug, and we'll send a check in the mail. But it matches nicely with this conversation, which is it really alignment, or is it really more of a unification of marketing and sales now, right? Even when you say alignment, I think this is what Jill's getting to, is that doesn't necessarily mean you're always sort of on the same team, right? So is it more of a unification? And ultimately, is that unification really unified around customer success? So it's not about sales. It's not about marketing. It's about getting those customers and making them successful. And I know for the early stage companies, right, that may be listening, one of the best pieces of advice that I give to all clients is that whoever your first customers are, make them wildly successful. So wildly successful that they have to sing your praise. And more importantly, if for some reason it doesn't work out, make them so wildly happy with what you're willing to do for them and still walk away, that they'll still go, you guys are onto something and I love it, but it's not for us. And they'll still sing your praises, right? So that's one thing that I see, but I'd love to hear what the rest of the group thinks about this sort of alignment versus unification as Jill poses the question.
I can dive in here. So I'm part of an early stage startup, Series A. We actually have created what we call the revenue team. So we're lucky enough to have Mike Volpe, former CMO of HubSpot, obviously big focus on inbound marketing, on our board, and he has been kind enough to dedicate a couple of hours a week in the office, one of which we get sales leaders in the room, we get our marketing leaders in the room, we have our C-suite in the room walking through pipeline, the projects that marketing is working on, collaboration between sales and marketing so that from a sales enablement perspective or from top of the funnel perspective, you actually have that open dialogue in an environment where you're looking at metrics, but you're also understanding the needs essentially that are going on there. So we do call ourselves the revenue team. In fact, my VP of sales and marketing at the time called themselves Chief Revenue Buddies instead of the CRO. They were two buds instead, which obviously a little bit funny, but similar concept. You see CRO also popping up, I think, as a title more frequently these days. And it is, Jill, to your point, beyond an alignment perspective, because you could absolutely be aligned and not necessarily unified, I guess.
Lee, what do you see around that? I know you work with a lot of different people. What's your take on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a trend one way or another saying let's marry sales and marketing together or let's split them apart. So the issue of unifying them under one title, whether it be revenue, for example, I haven't seen that per se as a trend. But you come back to the big issue, which is even if they're under one person who carries a title of Chief Revenue Officer, VP Sales and Marketing, the issue remains the same, which is you've got to get the folks tasked with marketing functions and the folks tasked with sales functions on the same page to achieve the core objective for the company.
Hey, Jeremy, do you have anything you wanted to throw in on this one?
Yeah, I'm with Lee completely. I mean, we have seen the chief revenue title rise, especially in smaller organizations where you have smaller headcount anyhow, so you're combining functions. And yeah, I agree that you may start with an advantage to be aligned and unified, but as Lee says, at the end of the day, regardless of title, it's about activities and an understanding of messaging and how that impacts your customers and prospects throughout the cycle.
We've got another question from Joe Hansen. This goes back a little bit to this compensation piece, which I think is often an easy thing to focus on to try and solve this problem. But the question is, can you speak more about how marketing might need to be compensated? Is it through commissions of MQLs? Are they comped on closed revenue too? And that often could be a performance thing. Are there bonuses? What are you guys seeing out there in the marketplace that sort of helps on that particular topic?
I'm laughing because somewhere out there in webinar land is my CMO. And her and I are having these discussions right now. So I'll have to defer over to Lee.
Please record them. Record them.
Yeah, exactly. We're kind of iterative and agile in what we're doing. And yeah, of course, we're trying to bite from what we're seeing within our customer base and what's working for them. But frankly, we're still testing those waters. So I'll defer over to Pia and Lee.
So one of the things that I do a lot of work with regarding compensation is looking at the activities and behaviors that marketing is tasked with, the activities and behaviors that sales is tasked with. So rather than just looking at a revenue number and saying, let's pay a percentage of that revenue number to salespeople and call it a day, it's looking at what it takes to get to the revenue number. And one of the things I always tell executives, you can't do anything about revenue, but there's a lot you can do about the activities and behaviors that lead to it. So put dollars, put some incentives, put some programs, some contests, whatever you want to call them, towards getting the right activities and behaviors from your sales and marketing folks, and then the result takes care of itself.
I think we see, contests all the time in sales, right? We see spiffs. We see that. Are you suggesting, Lee, that we should be doing that with marketing? That, if you've got a demand gen person, put something special out there for them?
Absolutely. If you're tasking, so let's say one of the functions is around inbound marketing within your marketing department, and you're relying on getting X number of leads to support the sales function, why not put some dollars towards performance?
Have you seen anything that works? I mean, this is just, it seems so simple, and we're surrounded by it. This is one of those things where I don't see the forest for the trees. Anything you can care to share with the audience about this is what you've seen work for marketing organizations?
Sure. So, for example, each person in your marketing department is going to have some set salary of X, whatever that might be. And taking a step back, as you think about the plan, I believe that marketing folks should have a leverage plan just like sales folks and have some guaranteed dollars associated with it. But based on the success that they have in the function, for example, if you're tasked with generating a certain number of leads for the salespeople with a defined scope, so let's say you're tasked with generating 1,000 leads a month for the sales team with a particular set demographic, then you should feel some success, not just get your regular monthly paycheck. You should be sharing in those dollars, and because you know what's happening, those 1,000 leads get passed over to the sales side, and they're earning commission in putting that together and making those deals happen. So this does become a financial discussion where your financial people need to get involved and look at cost of sales and marketing from a compensation perspective, make sure there's enough dollars to go around.
Boy, I think anybody who could get 1,000 inbound leads a month would be very happy. I don't care how big your organization is. So by all means, comp that person if they can get you 1,000 of them for sure. That's great. Thank you. Another great question coming. This is from Meredith Higgins. So do you feel marketing should always alert sales to the different ad campaigns so that sales can be knowledgeable of those campaigns, right? So now I think we're talking a little bit more around specifically whether it's pay-per-click or, if you paid attention to the financials yesterday, Facebook ads yesterday seem to be doing quite well. Or do you think sales doesn't necessarily need to know that information in order to close the lead? Which, does sales need to know everything? Oftentimes we like to think we do. Back to that ego issue. But do they need to know about every pay-per-click campaign or everything that's out there so they can understand where it's coming from?
I think there's value in clearly communicating what's going on between functions. For us internally and for a lot of the orgs that I've worked for at this point, we have a marketing calendar that sales has access to, so it's sort of drink at your own leisure, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, clearly. But I think it's important if you want to maximize whatever campaign you are running for sales to have some understanding of what's going on, because if they're getting lead, they have no idea where it's coming from. We're talking about informed buyers. These are not people who just want to be hit up because, there was an MQL. They want you to understand what their journey was and how they got there. And then generally speaking too, I say there's some sort of message that marketing wants around those different inbound leads or leads in general. So I think it's absolutely important to have that communication between the two. Do you need to be proactive about it? I think that depends largely on the size of your org. And the frequency of the campaigns that you're doing. For an organization like mine, I know everything because we're not doing super high frequency, super high touch things. But for somebody that's part of Log Me In, for example, probably a totally different approach. And I think that the good sales rep probably knows what's going on and will be proactive in reaching out to figure out what is going on. But I don't think that you necessarily need to push it down their throats.
If you read anything that's been written by a marriage counselor, you ever hear them talk, what is the number one thing that they talk about for a healthy marriage? Communication, right? And so the sales leaders, the marketing leaders need to get together and figure out what level of communication each one of them wants. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all that says, you have to have a meeting every Thursday and talk about X, Y, and Z. The two of them need to get on the same page, this whole idea of alignment, and figure out what level of communication, what each one wants to know and needs to know to perform in the function and get their department performing optimally.
I agree with Lee and Pia completely. Communication is important. I run Enablement. Enablement is making sure we're communicating to sales and readying them for every situation. However, this day and age, there's information coming at us 100 miles an hour from 100 different angles. So you have to take that into account. Gone are the days of throwing information somewhere and expecting people to come and find it when they think they need it. Because what we learned is people will just figure out what they're comfortable with and run with that, rather than be aligned with the information you want them to understand. Gone are the days of pushing information completely proactively at people as you roll it out, because there's just too much. People come to a classroom, they absorb it, they walk out of the room, they've already forgot 80% of it, they don't know when to apply it, etc. So what we think is important going forward is situational enablement and situational fluency, and we believe that around the corner, and it's already starting to happen with marketing automation, enablement platforms, CRM, etc., where salespeople will get the information they need at the right time as they're engaging with somebody. It's impossible to go and, for example, if Pia and I were engaged in a sales cycle, it would be impossible for me to understand, Pia's background, her interests, the information about her company, what they sell, what their profits are, what challenges they seek, how the marketing programs that my company is executing align with Pia and her organization. It's just so much, and that's one interaction that I'm going to have, and I might have 10 today, right? So it's this concept of tools and process that are out there and helping me as the seller be situationally fluent at that time that I'm prepping 5 minutes before my call with Pia. And the reason I bring this up is marketing and what marketing programs Pia has shown interest in and taken action on. That's a core marketing automation benefit. And if you have a real good infrastructural team or a sales ops team, you'll have a CRM, you'll have a marketing automation component, you'll have a sales enablement component. And those three together allow you, as you're about to engage, to understand what people have consumed from a marketing campaign standpoint and what information you need to know about them and what information you should be sharing with them based on where they are in their buying process.
That's really good. That's a very deep piece. So thank you, Jeremy, on that one. So we've got another question, unless Pia or Lee, do you have something else you want to add to what Jeremy said there? So we got another question coming from Ryan Maney. So Ryan's questions are coming in, everybody. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And Ryan's question is, many times I see the C-suite objectives between marketing and sales are wildly different and contribute to this misalignment, right? And have you noticed any sort of best C-suite level objectives that connect sales and marketing? And this may go back to some of the stuff we covered earlier in the conversation, but I think it's another great way to ask the same question.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit the other day, the ivory tower syndrome. Everybody goes into a conference room trying to look smart, saying, we know what people want. And then they deploy it, and the salespeople, what are we doing? This is the exact same thing our competitors are doing, only we're charging twice the price. So that's a really sensitive subject. The whole idea of making sure that a company doesn't have ivory tower syndrome and just locking themselves in a conference room. It means talking to the salespeople, your front line, what are they seeing and hearing from clients? Having client focus groups, seeing what they want, right? When you have client focus groups and figure out what they want, and then you build it, guess what? They buy it from you, right? It's a great concept, one of my favorites. And the same thing on the marketing side. Marketing is not only doing research of today, they're looking for trends. Where's everything going? And having that type of healthy conversation with sales, saying, I know what we're doing today, I know where we are. But, for example, mobile, right? Mobile seemingly came out of nowhere. So salespeople were just selling internet stuff and web-based tools. And then all of a sudden people are saying, and these people being buyers, were saying to them, oh, are you mobile friendly? Mobile? What's mobile? Right? Marketing, if marketing was involved in the conversation, would be saying to them, hey, you need to know where this is all going. It's all going to the phone, and we need to be prepared for that. So we need to talk to operations and our technology folks, make sure they're prepared for it. And sales folks, you need to know how to have that conversation when it comes up.
great. I think that's really, really strong. Lee, suppose you've got this ivory tower syndrome, right? Let's talk about this. And what are some of the things you're encouraging people to do to, break down those walls, build bridges between those towers, right? It's one thing to say we've got the problem. It's another one to say, well, how do we address it, right? What are you suggesting, right? Aside from locking people in the conference room and you can't come out till, everybody's happy.
I think you pick a few members of the sales team that are well respected among colleagues, that the organization feels has a lot to bring to the table around current trends and what they're hearing from the marketplace. At the same side, you bring marketing to the table with the research and analysis that they've done, and combine that with what you're hearing directly from buyers and what they're saying directionally. I'll give you an example. I spent 10 years as an executive in the employment screening industry, and I've never seen an industry where buyer demands changed as quickly as this industry did. So when I first got into it, you would purchase a part of a drug test process from one supplier, another part from another supplier, another part from another supplier, and then you used anywhere from 6 to 20 background screening companies. And then that kept morphing and morphing and morphing into, I just want one person for my drug testing services, one for my background screening services. And then it was, I just want one provider for my employment screening services. Oh, what about international screening? Oh, I want integrations with applicant tracking systems. And the demand just kept going and going and going over a 10-year period. And if you weren't evolving with that, and I mean quick, you sit there going, where'd all my clients go? We're done. So it's extremely important that those conversations, again, the three-legged stool of your salespeople, your marketing people, and your clientele, your buyers, if you will, and getting that information so the company can make the best decisions going forward.
Richard, I have to jump onto this because this is something we're talking about in every meeting these days. What we're seeing, basically what Lee said is that gone are the days of waterfall-based enablement, waterfall-based marketing, right? You have to be more agile. And I mean, we've seen that in technology. We see agile kind of pervasive in our lives today. And we're seeing a lot with our customers. We're testing it internally. And if you can constantly, to Lee's point, take the temperature of your sales team, your customers, as well as your internal ivory tower strategists, and make iterative moves along the way and adjust, that's when you're going to be most successful. Now, in order to do that, not only do you need alignment at the ivory tower and a governance team and that feedback mechanism, but you need a process and tools that allow you to constantly keep your finger on the pulse of whether or not the marketing messages are resonating with sales, whether or not the sales message is resonating with customers, whether or not the marketing message is resonating with customers. It's all about agile enablement and agile marketing. You have to have a process and infrastructure in place to do that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I totally agree. Which, let's sort of even back up a little bit to okay, so you recognize this issue. Maybe you're the salesperson on this webinar. Maybe you're the marketing person. It's going to be an uncomfortable conversation at first, right? Like it back to Lee's point of marriage counseling, right? My marriage counselor just told me I needed to shut up, but that's another webinar. It's just a joke, trying to keep it a lot lively. But how do you do that, right? Like who needs to come first, right? Like someone's got to step up to the plate and sort of have the courage to say, hey, this is a problem for us. And maybe Lee or Jeremy, how that's happened in your organization now, or maybe your previous organizations. I know, Pia, you guys have built a machine around this already. You've built your revenue team, but sort of taking a step back for the folks who are like, oh, we need to do this. How are we going to do it? How do I do it without offending this egomaniacal salesperson or this marketing-driven C-suite leader, right? What do you guys think?
I can take that. I shared this, some of us were speaking the other day. I've had a lot of success over the last 20 years in sales operations and sales enablement leadership roles with a very low-tech, high-touch process where you literally just bring people into the room, to Lee's point. You identify all the right people and you bring them into the room. And, everybody comes in with their guard up, especially if they understand the topic of the workshop. But, you drop technology, you get a whiteboard, and you just start whiteboarding the as-is situation. Just allow everybody to get up there and draw circles and boxes and indicate the process as it currently is. Use different colors to indicate what's working and what's not. It's not necessarily about the picture that's drawn. It's about the conversation that enables and that it encourages. And it allows people to kind of get their guard down and just talk about, from their perspective, what's happening in this world today. As we're all executing, because we're all trying very hard to be successful. As we're executing and following the process, we understand what's working, what's not. Through that, it encourages a dialogue and allows you to then whiteboard a bit of a to-be model. Okay, in a perfect world, this is how we should be working together. But then from there, you walk out of that room, and again, it can't just be waterfall. You can't tweak the as-is or adjust to a completely new to-be model. You have to transform to the to-be model, but then you have to understand that group, that three-legged stool, has to meet frequently as a governance team, and you have to, as I said before, have to adopt these agile principles to constantly be measuring and reacting.
So I'm doing a lot of work with organizations on a topic that is near and dear to both sales and marketing, and that's differentiation. And you talk about getting that group in a room and getting different perspectives and hearing the marketing side, hearing the sales side, hear different salespeople saying different things. And I describe marketing and differentiation, sales differentiation differently, if you will. If you think of marketing differentiation, what they're tasked with is a one-directional communication for the masses, right? They're designed to attract mass audiences to the organization, to pave the way for sales. Sales differentiation is two-way communication for a targeted buyer. So if you think of what a company has, it has this portfolio of differentiators that may or may not be written down, and the question becomes, are these really differentiators? Under what circumstances are these really differentiators? Which of our buyers would care about those particular differentiators? So it's a great conversation to bridge the gap between sales and marketing, because marketing will say, hey, these are things that make us different. These are compelling things. And sales could say, you know what, my conversation with buyers, it's not compelling. And then marketing say, well, tell me how you're having that conversation. And then they hear it and they say, you know what, we're missing this point, that point, this point. Here are some ways that can really make that pop, bring it to life. It's a wonderful conversation, a great way to start bridging the gap between sales and marketing, because it's important to both of them. They're both tasked with differentiation as it helps to win more business at the prices that the company wants.
That's great. So, and if we can throw some alcohol and trust falls into that, I think we'll have a good, team bonding experience, right? These are the jokes, people. Are going to have to just deal with them. Let's move forward a little bit with trends, right? What are you currently seeing in today's B2B marketplace, and how are the trends affecting the relationships between sales and marketing? I don't know if this might lead us down a best practices road. I'm not sure, but account-based everything is the new black this year, right? And it's not that new. But it's certainly caught back on, right? Which is great. I love the approach. What else are you seeing? What else are you experiencing out there?
So I'd say account-based marketing. I mean, obviously you just said that, Richard, but account-based everything, it's interesting even when you hear sellers, right? They've been taking this account-based selling approach for years. And they're the first ones to tell you that they came up with the concept long before it's taken off like it has, I think, in the last 2 years. You've got companies like Terminus is the only one that I can think of right now, but they're really experiencing a massive amount of success. You've got marketing teams providing air cover with ads, direct mail. Like when in the recent future have you actually seen direct mail be super effective in the B2B space, which is kind of exciting. Like there are a lot of different channels that I think are re-entering the space after we went so digital. But that's the one that I'm hearing consistently. And it does bring up, it's back to that concept of everything is contributing to bottom line and this progression of pipeline and acceleration of pipeline and the bottom line revenue. But you have salespeople who are saying, yeah, that was my approach forever. Why didn't you guys catch on sooner? You've got marketing saying, yeah, it's a great idea, transitioning their entire databases, whether it's a CRM, marketing automation software, spending a pretty significant amount of money on this concept that we've seen on the sales side be successful for such a long time. It's great to get the support and actually progress people through with that multi-touch attribution, and more importantly, be able to track it back to the actual success of the company. That's the thing that I'm hearing probably most frequently from the marketing side. I think people are really excited about APE.
Richard, I'll add to that. So I agree with Pia. We see a lot of account-based marketing trends, but I'll go back a little further. In the late 90s, a company called Salesforce.com was born, which really revolutionized sales and CRM. I think they went public around 2004. There was this massive migration of companies, that figured, hey, if we just spend a few $1 million implementing Salesforce.com and other CRM tools, we're going to hit all of our quotas. So they did that, and they realized the benefits, especially from a managing, coaching, and reporting and analytics pipeline, et cetera, standpoint. But guess what? We weren't all hitting quotas still. So then 2007, 8, 9-ish, Eloqua, Marketo, Pardot, all kind of were born. And now here's a platform much like CRM for sales that allows marketers to mass market based on parameters, right? The two of them integrated together started this bridge between sales and marketing. So in 2010-11, again, people say, okay, we have CRM, we have marketing automation, we're still not hitting our goals, so now what? And since 2010, what you've seen is upwards of 400 plus companies that are in this sales productivity space, which is marketing software, sales software. And I call it the silver bullet syndrome. Everybody's saying, okay, I've done marketing automation, I've done CRM, I have loose alignment, but we still need better alignment. We still need to drive more sales faster. So everybody's seeking that next silver bullet. And they're not these big, large, heavy behemoth type systems anymore. They're more smaller point solutions. So the trend we're seeing is it's chaos, frankly. There's sales ops and marketing ops, people trying to find that next silver bullet. Let's try this, and a year later it's not being adopted. Okay, let's cancel that and try this. And what the best in breed companies are doing is really taking a step back. There's great salespeople out there. There's great technology out there. All of the technologies that venture capital is behind, all 400 of them are great solutions. Otherwise, venture wouldn't be behind them, right? But that doesn't mean that you can just go out and grab any one of them, lay them on top of your CRM and marketing automation tool and expect that silver bullet. So the trend we're seeing is ops and marketing really aligning, again, as we've talked about, and looking at what additional infrastructure that they put in place, what additional process do they put in place. And with a careful strategic eye, building the top of the funnel is extremely important. CRM, marketing automation, in alignment with sales and marketing will really help you do that. But when only 27% of first calls lead to second calls, taking those top of the funnel leads through the funnel and hopefully getting to the point where they come out the bottom of the funnel is arguably even more important. The amount of money that's spent just to get to fill the top of the funnel can only be valued if you can pull those leads through the funnel. So the trend that we're seeing, and I would also say it's a best practice, is people are starting to take a step back and slowing down from this consumer, this silver bullet sort of approach to sales productivity, being more strategic in the technologies and the processes that they're selecting and implementing. IT's actually getting back involved in the decision-making process to try and govern that a little bit and control the chaos. So absolutely, make sure you have your infrastructure in place, CRM, marketing automation, fill the top of the funnel. But from there, align, choose the right programs, the right messages, and most importantly, the right tools and technology to allow you to govern that process so that you can convert the top of the funnel through the funnel and convert those into sales.
I think it's really interesting that you bring that up, actually. I've noticed an increased focus on workflows. So it is about the technologies that you're investing in. Totally agree that you have to take a step back and evaluate, okay, we have all of these tools. How do they work together, right? Like, I think a lot of people threw money at a problem or what they perceived to be a problem, and they ended up with a number of tools that in and of themselves are extremely interesting and obviously have captured the interest of VC. They continue to grow. They continue to take on customers, but ultimately, if it's not talking to your systems of record, Salesforce and your marketing automation software, your CRM, your marketing automation software, and my lights just went off because I haven't moved in a little while, then you're not getting the ultimate workflows there, or the actual data to be able to iterate on your process. As you said, process is actually really important, and the governance of that continually is really important too.
How do you manage sort of all this technology, right? Like there's so much coming at you, right? I see this a lot on the sales side, right? There's so much that the sales reps can use or the SDRs can use, and it's this question of I've broken it down into efficiency versus effectiveness, which is really happening. But the same argument could be made on this side of the conversation too. Where is that, right? We've actually got a question from someone who's that would lead to where I'm going with this which is, do you even, as you start to build this top of the funnel stuff, how much is too much automation, right? Do you use something like a Conversica for early stages in this marketing movement, right? To go fast and strong towards more and gaining more customers. Like, where is that touch? And I think I know the answer, but I'll let the three of you sort of jump in on that one.
I'll let you two guys run with it.
All right, yeah, I'll take it. Trying to make sure that I'm taking my turn and being fair to others. Richard, I actually
let the egos rule. Just go with the ego. It's okay. We're friends here.
All right, Richard. So I agree with you. In my opinion, we break it down to exactly that: efficiency versus effectiveness. Right? Efficiencies are technology that dumbs down the sales process and automates tasks that humans would normally have to do that takes up time. Right? So there's a lot of apps, sales productivity applications out there that focus on efficiencies, and again, those are great tools. And to Pia's point, in and of themselves, you could probably come up with some ROI justification to purchase and implement those. And they're important. Frankly, our suite of products, we have many of those. But what I believe, based on 20 years of trying to crack this nut, is effectiveness is where you need to prioritize your investments, right? If you're a company that just has money and resources galore and you have the ability to purchase and implement many different tools as long as they're aligned to Pia's point, then go for it, right? But most companies don't have that. Most companies have limited budget and limited resources and frankly, limited capacity from the end user to even absorb all of these tools and processes. So we always say, hey, you've got to fill the funnel, right? Marketing automation, investing in a great marketing team and a marketing strategy, and filling that funnel is important. But from there, it's about effectiveness. Again, I said it before, and I'll say it again: 27% of first meetings turn into a second meeting. Now, that's an average, right? There's people out there on the webinar that say, no, or we have an 80% conversion. There's others that say we have a 10% conversion. But the average is 27%, and that's horrible. If you think about the amount of money that's spent to get to that meeting, converting that meeting and getting to that next step, earning the right to get to the next step to continue that engagement is paramount, and that's all about effectiveness. It's all about making sure that your sellers are connecting with what the buyer expects at that stage of the buying cycle. And to Pia's point earlier, the buyers are armed with all sorts of information from their independent research as well as the information that your organization has marketed to them. So as a salesperson, if you don't show up credible, aligned with where they are in the buying process, and armed with the right information to earn the right to move forward, in other words, if you are not effective, then that lead's going to die, and all of the money that went into producing that lead is thrown out the window. So we believe you have to prioritize effectiveness solutions. And it's not only solutions, it can be initiatives before efficiency.
And related to that, I'm amazed. We talked earlier about trends, and one trend that still shocks me that I don't see, and that's the appreciation for having a documented sales process. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with executives. So imagine you manufacture widgets, and you hire 10 people to make those for you. Are you going to let each of those 10 make your widget any way they want? So of course not. And why do you let your 10 salespeople sell whatever way they want? So when we talk about these technology solutions, where they all fall down is if the company doesn't have a documented sales process that is also managed, so it's more than just on paper, it's very hard to get performance from any of these technology tools because you've got 10 salespeople doing whatever they want to do, however they want to do it, and it's very difficult to be efficient and effective that way.
I have to say I'm shocked that the term SLA has not been used once in the 51 minutes that we've been on. But I think there's a point to that. Absolutely. Process is king, and process can have the same impact that purchasing a tool has. If you reevaluate your process and make sure that things are running correctly internally. Like, you can give a tennis pro a crappy racket, they're still going to be a tennis pro. You give the kid on the street a nice tennis racket, doesn't make him a tennis pro. So it does come down to that process side of things. And I think, even that's siloed sometimes. I think process in sales. I think there's process in every function, but there's also SLA across multiple functions, making sure that there is an agreement and an understanding and clear communication between functions to ultimately reach a goal that you have collaboratively identified and taken the time to build a process around.
Absolutely.
That's great. That's really, really good. A couple more questions, one more from the audience, then I've got a couple more. But when you see sales and marketing starting to partnership more closely, right, you're at the beginning of this journey. And by the way, thank you, Ryan Maney, for asking this question. What have you seen be the most important hurdles to try and overcome in the first 6 months, maybe the first 12 months, right? Again, it's you got to start somewhere, right? You've got your trust falls and your team building exercises, but what are those things that you want to try and overcome? And maybe to the other side of that question too is, what are some of the red flags you need to be aware of that say, hey, it's time for us to figure this out? So again, maybe we'll have Pia start on this one.
Well, mine is a little bit, I think, different than the rest, just because I've been part of startups. So I think it starts honestly in the hiring phase, and Lee probably can talk about this too, but the reality is, when you are making those decisions to bring people on, whether it's in sales or marketing, I think that it's really important for your priorities to be outlined in terms of, what is the relationship going to be, so that by the time they come on, there's already that understanding of the environment that you're stepping into. I think that's true of any hiring situation, but I do think that it's really important for a sales leader to be involved in, a marketing hire to be involved in a sales hire. Beyond that, it's funny, we were talking about the differentiators. The one thing that stuck out in my mind is this whole concept of being on a call, and I think this is true in any org, when somebody says, hey, I'll go to your website to check out more. How frequently do you have a sales rep say, don't? I don't think it does a good job of delivering our value prop. I hear that all the time from tons of sales reps across many, many companies. So there is this concept, again, of the sales message might be different from the marketing message. That's a red flag that I know frequently, and definitely something that is perfect for that kind of war room scenario where you get the right people in the room, you talk about the messages you need, and maybe the different paths. So maybe the front page is more of a marketing differentiator, and then as you dig into the customer journey, maybe they're getting more of that sales differentiation, but that's definitely one that comes to mind.
Mm-hmm. The question was asked about that first 6 months and what does that look like? You have to really look at every company on an individual basis. I don't think there's a set recipe that you could say, here's the set areas that you want to analyze. But if you start with this statement, we could bring in more revenue if, and you fill in the blank and say, and then you start looking at where those opportunities, not in say issues, I said opportunities reside on the marketing side, on the sales side. From there, then you can start looking at the ones that could have the biggest impact on the organization if you really capitalize on those opportunities. But I couldn't sit here and say, here's the way to go about doing this universally, works in every company. But if you start with that statement and to fill in the blank, then you can start to chart the course together.
I'll agree with both Lee and Pia. I think, first of all, I agree with Lee in that there's no set recipe. But if I was to make two recommendations, I would say get your group together and define a qualified lead. What's a qualified lead? Who is a qualified lead? What does it look like? Once you're aligned on what a qualified lead looks like, then determine the type. What is the message that resonates with them as both a lead and as somebody who's going through the funnel? If you can align on the definition of a qualified lead and the messaging that both marketing and sales will use to address that lead throughout the different buying phases, it's a good start. Last thing sales wants is a bunch of leads thrown at them that they perceive to be not qualified. Last thing marketing wants is to do a great job getting a bunch of leads to sales only to find out that sales is working other leads. So I would start there.
Yeah, Jeremy, you remind me of a client situation I had around this marketing sales issue. So this company was doing lead generation webinars, but the topics had nothing to do with what this company did for a living. So marketing would say, hey, we just had 150 in a webinar. That means we generated 150 leads for sales. But the salespeople might as well have been cold calling, because the reason someone registered or attended that webinar had nothing to do with the issues that this company addressed. So there was a complete disconnect between, like you were saying, Jeremy, about defining what a lead is. What are we trying to get to help salespeople shorten the sales cycle and convert more leads?
Yeah, there's actually a question. I'm going to sort of make a statement out of it, because we're getting to the end of the hour on this, is that, oftentimes marketing sometimes will focus on sort of this big picture sexy campaign, and sales is looking for something that's more tactical, right? Like, how am I going to use this today? And sort of, Jeremy, back to what you were saying a moment ago about, and what we've been saying all day is, like, there's got to be an SLA. We got to define what an MQL is. Marketing can still have that sexy campaign. It'll just be a smarter sexy campaign, right? Because it will get you everything that everybody is really wanting to, and sort of align those pieces. So this has been really great. I do want to give each of you, a 30-second chance to sort of plug what you're doing, who you're with, what's going on, so that people do want to reach out to you. Give out a Twitter handle or an email address if you want. So how about we start with Pia, ladies first? You want to let everybody know what you're doing, Pia?
Sure thing. So Attend is an event management program that, interestingly enough, has focused a little bit differently than the rest out there on sales and marketing alignment. So concept of workflows that I was mentioning, we integrate with your marketing automation and Salesforce. But the real kind of turnkey solution there is the concept of enabling your sales team at an event, which is a marketing campaign, to understand who's going to be there, to be able to take their notes, log follow-up tasks in Salesforce. So the concept there being optimize the face-to-face conversations that you have, make the most of what marketing is giving you, and then from the sales side or from the marketing side, keep your reps accountable. You know who they're responsible for, whether they engage with somebody. Make sure that you can actually drive revenue with your marketing campaign out of events.
Great. Jeremy, you are our sponsor, so I want to tell people a little bit about SAVO, excuse me.
Yeah, no problem. Well, before I tell people who SAVO is, I just want to give a little context. So I've been doing this job for 20 years. I'm super passionate about optimizing the sales process and making salespeople efficient and effective. I've done it across multiple organizations. I've implemented pretty much every major tool out there, many times, Salesforce 5 times, every marketing automation platform, et cetera. The reason I say that is I was actually a customer of SAVO's twice over, and I left that world to come over and work for SAVO because I was so proud of what they're capable of and where they're going as an organization. So SAVO is the world's leading sales enablement platform. There's many sales enablement point solutions out there, but SAVO is the only organization that offers a complete platform, deep and wide feature functions that enable sellers during that specific moment in time where they're engaged with the customer to be most effective. There's also some efficiency tools that allow them to save time. So they're a thought leader in the industry. The roadmap of where we're going is just amazing, and we're really going to disrupt the space. So I'm extremely excited to work here. We have 250 plus large enterprise global customers that use our platform and absolutely love what we do, and we love working with them. And the last thing I'll say is If you care to learn more about SAVO, you can contact me directly. Obviously, you can find us online. I'm at Schultz on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn and everywhere else, obviously. But we have a yearly event called Connections. It's the the second week in October in Chicago. And it's a place where people like me, like us, who are interested in sales and marketing and alignment and driving productivity and efficiency and effectiveness all meet. We highlight some successful customers, and then we allow people to work with one another. It's a great event.
Awesome. Lee, tell us, everybody, where you can get in touch with you if they don't already know.
All right, great. So again, my name is Lee Salz. I'm the founder and sales management strategist for salesarchitects.com. What we do is help companies build the strategy, process, and tools that they need to drive profitable revenue. Most relevant thing that we do with respect to today's conversation, if you go to salesdifferentiation.com, you can see the program that we offer that helps companies really understand what their differentiators are and how to best communicate those with buyers. And you can follow us on Twitter at Sales Architects.
That's great. Well, we want to thank everybody for joining us. I do want to let people know about a couple more Sales Hacker webinars coming up. August 2nd at 11 a.m. Pacific time, we have the secret sauce to account-based marketing and sales, sponsored by Engagio. And Max Altshuler will be doing that along with John Miller. So that'll be a really interesting one. And then on August 9th, we have the top tools and tactics to exceed your goal in 2016, also being hosted by Max Altshuler, and we're going to have Zoom Info as our sponsor on that one. So along with Scott Luttrell. So I think both of those are going to be coming up. If you haven't signed up for them, they're going to be great. And they're going to be huge, as our good friend Donald would say. But that's, again, another webinar. I do want to thank everybody for their time today. I want to thank our panelists for giving up an hour of their time today, and then, about 45 minutes a few days ago to, really make sure this was a smooth thing. And thank you again to the audience for some awesome questions. This is recorded, so we will be posting it on the Sales Hacker Forum and getting it out there. And again, thank you, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.